The stagecoach lurched violently over a hidden rut in the dusty road, and Willa Norton felt her body launch upward from the wooden bench just as the door beside her swung wide open, sending her tumbling out into the harsh Dakota Territory afternoon, where the earth met her with unforgiving force. Nathan Zimmerman had been riding parallel to the stage route about 50 yards off, guiding his chestnut mare toward White River, South Dakota, with a string of 3 Mustangs. He'd spent the last 2 weeks breaking when he saw the woman's body hit the ground and roll like a tumbleweed caught in a storm. Without thinking, his heels dug into his horse's flanks, and he was racing through the dust cloud the stagecoach left behind, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched the stage continue on, oblivious to its lost passenger. The woman lay still in the dirt, her dark blue traveling dress torn at the shoulder, her bonnet hanging by its ribbons around her neck. Nathan pulled his mare to a sliding stop and leapt from the saddle before the animal had fully halted, his boots hitting the ground hard as he ran to where she lay. Her eyes were closed, blonde hair escaping from pins that had once held it neatly in place, and a thin trail of blood traced from her temple down to her jawline. "Madam," he said, dropping to his knees beside her, his hands hovering uncertainly over her still form. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, and then opened to reveal eyes the color of creek water in summer, green and brown mixed together in a way that made his breath catch despite the urgency of the moment. She winced, her hand moving to her head, and he gently caught her wrist before she could touch the wound. "Easy now," Nathan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "You took a hard fall off that stage. Don't move too quick." "The stage," Willa whispered, her voice hoarse with dust and pain. She tried to sit up, and Nathan placed a hand on her shoulder to keep her down. "It's long gone," he told her. "They didn't see you fall. How bad are you hurting?" She assessed herself with the practicality of someone used to dealing with life's difficulties, moving her arms and legs experimentally. "My head feels like a mule kicked it, and my shoulder is screaming, but I don't think anything's broken." "That's good," Nathan said, relief flooding through him. "Real good. But we need to get you out of this sun and get that cut cleaned up. White River's about 3 miles west of here. Can you ride?" Willa looked at him properly for the first time, taking in the sun-weathered face beneath a dusty hat, brown eyes that held genuine concern, and a jaw covered in several days' worth of beard. He looked to be in his mid-20s, not much older than her own 22 years, and there was something solid about him that made her feel safe despite her vulnerable position. "I can ride," she said, and this time when she sat up, he helped her, his strong hands supporting her back as the world spun briefly before settling. "I don't have much choice, do I?" "Not unless you want to spend the night out here with the coyotes and rattlesnakes," Nathan said, and there was a hint of humor in his voice that made her almost smile despite everything. "My name's Nathan Zimmerman. I've got a small ranch about 5 miles outside White River." "Willa Norton," she replied, accepting his help as he got her to her feet. Her legs shook, but they held. "I was on my way to White River to take a position as a schoolteacher. All my belongings were on that stage." Nathan's jaw tightened. "We'll send word ahead. Get your things back." "Right now. Let's get you to the doctor." He brought his mare over, and the Mustangs he'd been leading followed docilely behind on their lead rope. With careful movements, Nathan helped Willa into the saddle, then swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins. She stiffened at first, unused to such proximity to a stranger, but as they started moving and she felt how securely he held her, how his chest provided a solid backrest that kept her from swaying, she allowed herself to relax slightly. The ride to White River passed in a blur of pain and heat. Nathan kept the mare at a steady walk, clearly trying not to jostle his injured passenger more than necessary, and he talked to her in a low, even voice, asking her questions to make sure she stayed conscious. Where was she from? Pennsylvania, she told him, a small town outside Philadelphia. What made her come west? The need for teachers, the promise of adventure, the desire to escape a life that felt too small and predetermined. Her father had died the previous year, and her mother had remarried quickly to a man Willa couldn't stand, making the decision to leave easier. That takes courage, Nathan said, and she could hear the respect in his voice. Coming all this way on your own. Or foolishness, Willa replied, trying to keep the bitterness from her tone. Considering I just fell out of a stagecoach and lost everything I own. You're alive, Nathan pointed out. That counts for something. White River materialized out of the dust like a mirage, a collection of wooden buildings lining a single main street with smaller structures scattered around it like dropped coins. It was the year 1882, and the town still had that raw, unfinished quality of settlements that hadn't quite decided if they would grow or fade away. Nathan guided his mare directly to a building with a hand-painted sign declaring it to be the office of Dr. Samuel Harrison, and he dismounted quickly before helping Willa down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and Nathan caught her around the waist, holding her steady. For a moment they stood like that, closer than propriety would normally allow, and Willa found herself looking up into his face, seeing the concern there, the kindness, and something else she couldn't quite name. "I've got you," Nathan said softly, and somehow she believed him completely. Dr. Harrison was a middle-aged man with gray threading through his dark hair and spectacles perched on his nose. He took one look at Willa and immediately ushered her into his examination room, clucking his tongue at the wound on her temple. Nathan waited outside, his hat in his hands, turning it over and over as he paced the small front room. When the doctor emerged 20 minutes later, Nathan straightened immediately. "How is she?" "Concussion. Some nasty bruising, and that cut needed stitches," Dr. Harrison reported. "But she's lucky. Could have been much worse. She needs rest, no sudden movements, and someone should watch her for the next day or so to make sure the concussion doesn't worsen." "I'll take care of it," Nathan said immediately, then seemed to realize how that sounded. "I mean, I'll make sure she's looked after. Is there a boarding house in town?" "Mrs. Patterson runs one on the east end of Main Street," the doctor said, studying Nathan with an expression that suggested he was seeing more than Nathan intended to show. "But she's full up this week with a family passing through. The hotel won't take a woman traveling alone without a male relation. You know how Patterson is about propriety." Nathan's jaw clenched. He knew exactly how particular the hotel owner was, turning away anyone who didn't meet his strict moral standards. "What do you suggest?" "Well," Dr. Harrison said slowly, "my wife and I have a spare room. Willa could stay with us for a few days until she's steady on her feet and we can sort out her situation with the school board." Relief flooded Nathan's face. "That would be good of you, Doc. Come back and see her tomorrow," the doctor said, and there was a knowing glint in his eye. "She'll want to thank you properly for saving her life." Nathan felt heat creep up his neck. "I didn't do much, just happened to be in the right place." "Funny how life works that way sometimes," Dr. Harrison said with a smile. Nathan left the doctor's office feeling strangely unsettled, like the ground had shifted beneath him without warning. He'd seen a woman fall from a stage and done what any decent person would do. But as he led his horses toward the livery stable, he couldn't get the image of those creek water eyes out of his mind, or the way she'd felt in his arms, solid and real and trusting. He spent the night at his ranch, a modest spread with a small house he'd built himself and a barn that housed 6 horses, and the dream of one day having a real horse breeding operation. He'd bought the land 3 years ago with money he'd saved working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas, and he'd been slowly building it into something that felt like home. But that night, as he lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, the house felt emptier than usual, and his thoughts kept drifting back to a blonde woman with eyes like water and courage enough to travel halfway across the country alone. The next morning, Nathan rode back into White River before the sun had fully cleared the horizon. He told himself he was just checking on an injured person, being neighborly, but he'd taken extra care with his appearance, shaving properly and putting on his cleanest shirt, and he didn't examine too closely why that might be. Dr. Harrison's house was a neat structure painted white with blue shutters, and his wife Margaret answered Nathan's knock with a welcoming smile. "You must be Nathan Zimmerman," she said. "Willa has been asking about you." Nathan's heart did something complicated in his chest. "How is she feeling?" "Sore and frustrated, but that's a good sign," Margaret Harrison said, leading him through the house to a sunny back room where Willa sat in a chair by the window, a book open in her lap. Her hair was neatly braided, though Nathan found himself preferring the wild, wind-blown version he'd first seen, and the bandage on her temple stood out stark white against her skin. "Mr. Zimmerman," Willa said, and her face brightened in a way that made something warm unfold in Nathan's chest. "I wanted to thank you. Dr. Harrison told me I could have died out there if you hadn't found me." "Nathan," he said, moving into the room and taking the chair across from her that Margaret indicated before discreetly leaving them alone. "Please, just Nathan." "Then you must call me Willa," she replied. Her smile faded slightly. "I've been trying to figure out what happened. I remember the stagecoach hitting something, a rock or a rut, and then the door flew open. I think maybe the latch was faulty. I grabbed for something to hold on to, but there was nothing there, and then I was falling." "The company should be held accountable," Nathan said, anger flaring on her behalf. "A faulty door could have killed you." "Perhaps," Willa said, "but I'm more concerned about my immediate problems. Dr. Harrison sent word to the stage depot, but my trunk and bags continued on to Rapid City with the stage. They won't be returned for at least a week, possibly longer. Everything I own is in those bags." "I'm sorry," Nathan said, wishing he could do something more concrete to help. "What about your teaching position?" "That's another problem," Willa sighed. "I was supposed to meet with the school board yesterday to finalize my contract. I sent a message explaining what happened, but I haven't heard back yet. I'm worried they'll think I'm unreliable and hire someone else." "That would be foolish of them," Nathan said firmly. "Teachers are hard to come by out here. They'd be lucky to have someone with your education and determination." Willa looked at him with surprise, then something softer. "You don't know anything about my education or determination. I know you came all the way from Pennsylvania to teach children in a rough Dakota Territory town," Nathan said. "I know you stayed conscious and coherent after a fall that could have killed you. That tells me plenty." They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily from one topic to another. Willa asked about his ranch, and Nathan found himself describing his dreams for it with an enthusiasm he usually kept private. She told him about growing up in Pennsylvania, about her love of books and learning, about the small school where she'd taught for 2 years before deciding to head west. "The thing is," Willa said, her hands folding in her lap, "I felt suffocated there. Everyone knew everyone's business, and they all had opinions about what a young, unmarried woman should and shouldn't do. Coming here felt like a chance to breathe, to be someone other than the poor Norton girl whose father drank himself to death, and whose mother remarried indecently fast." Nathan heard the pain beneath the words and wanted to reach out and take her hand, but he kept his own hands on his knees. Out here, people are more concerned with whether you can do the work than who your family is. You'll do fine, Willa. I'm sure of it. Over the next 3 days, Nathan found reasons to visit Dr. Harrison's house each morning and afternoon. He brought Willa books borrowed from the small lending library above the general store. He brought news about her trunk, which had been located and was being sent back. He brought wildflowers he'd picked on the ride into town, presenting them with an awkwardness that made Willa laugh, and then wince because laughing made her head hurt. On the 4th day, Willa was strong enough to take a short walk, and Nathan offered her his arm as they strolled slowly down Main Street. White River was bustling with afternoon activity, miners and cowboys and families going about their business, and more than a few curious looks were directed at Nathan and Willa as they passed. "I'm afraid we're causing talk," Willa said quietly. "Let them talk," Nathan replied. "You haven't done anything wrong, and neither have I." In Philadelphia, an unmarried woman being seen so frequently with an unmarried man would be scandalous, Willa said, but there was amusement in her voice rather than concern. "We're not in Philadelphia," Nathan pointed out. "And I like spending time with you. I'm not going to stop just because someone might gossip." Willa looked up at him, and Nathan was struck again by those remarkable eyes. "I like spending time with you too," she admitted, and his heart soared. They reached the end of the street and turned back, their pace slow and easy. "The school board wants to meet with me tomorrow," Willa said. "Dr. Harrison thinks I'm well enough now. I'm nervous, Nathan. What if they've changed their minds about hiring me?" "They won't," Nathan said with more confidence than he felt. "But if they do, there are other towns that need teachers. You'll find a place, Willa. I know you will." The school board meeting took place in a stuffy room above the bank, and Nathan waited outside on the street, ostensibly checking on his mare but really watching the door for Willa to emerge. When she finally did, her face was flushed but smiling. "I got the position," she said, hurrying toward him with more energy than he'd seen since the accident. "They were very understanding about what happened, and they're pleased to have me. School starts in 2 weeks, which gives me time to prepare and recover fully." "That's wonderful," Nathan said, and he meant it, even though a selfish part of him worried that once she was settled into her new life, she wouldn't have time for a rancher who lived 5 miles outside town. "We should celebrate. Will you have dinner with me?" "There's a restaurant. Nothing fancy, but the food is decent." "I would like that very much," Willa said, and the way she looked at him made Nathan feel like he could rope the moon and pull it down from the sky. Dinner was a simple affair of beef stew and fresh bread, but Nathan couldn't remember enjoying a meal more. They talked and laughed, and somewhere between the main course and the coffee, Nathan realized he was falling in love with this woman who'd tumbled into his life as unexpectedly as she'd tumbled from that stagecoach. When he walked her back to the Harrison house as dusk settled over White River, Nathan knew he had to be honest with her. At the door, he turned to face her, his hat in his hands again, that nervous tell he couldn't seem to break. "Willa," he started, then had to clear his throat. "I know we've only known each other less than a week, and I know you've got your teaching position to focus on, but I need you to know that this hasn't been just kindness or neighborly concern for me. I care about you, more than I probably should, given the circumstances." Willa's eyes widened, but she didn't step back. Instead, she moved closer, close enough that he could smell the lavender soap Margaret Harrison had given her. "Nathan, I've been hoping you'd say something like that. I care about you too. These past few days, you've been the best part of every day. When I think about what might have happened if you hadn't been there, if someone else had found me or no one at all, I feel sick. But then, I think that maybe I was meant to fall from that stage, because it brought me to you." Nathan couldn't help himself. He reached up and gently cupped her face with one hand, careful to avoid the healing wound on her temple. "Can I court you proper? I know your life is just starting here, and I don't want to complicate things, but I want to see where this goes. I want to spend time with you, learn everything about you, and see if you feel the same way I do." "Yes," Willa breathed. "Yes, Nathan, I want that too." He kissed her then, soft and careful, a promise of things to come. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling like fools, and neither of them cared who might have seen. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Willa's trunk finally arrived, battered but intact, and she threw herself into preparing for her teaching duties. The school was a single-room structure on the north end of town, and it needed significant work before it would be ready for students. Nathan showed up every day after finishing his ranch work, helping to repair broken desks, replace cracked window glass, and scrub years of dust from every surface. They worked side by side, and Nathan marveled at Willa's dedication and competence. She'd brought boxes of books from Pennsylvania, and she unpacked them with the reverence most people reserved for precious jewels, explaining to Nathan which ones she'd use for which age groups, her whole face lighting up with passion for her work. "You're going to be an excellent teacher," Nathan said one evening as they were finishing up. The school looked transformed, clean and bright and welcoming. "I hope so," Willa said, running her hand over a freshly repaired desk. "These children deserve someone who cares about their education, who sees their potential. So many people back east think Western children are somehow less capable or less deserving, but that's nonsense. Every child deserves the chance to learn." Nathan felt his love for her deepen. "You're remarkable, you know that?" Willa blushed, but she smiled at him. "You're not so bad yourself, Cowboy." On Sunday, Nathan took Willa out to his ranch for the first time. She'd asked to see it several times, curious about the place that meant so much to him, and he'd been both eager and nervous to show her. What if she thought it was too small, too rough, too far from town? But when they rode up and Willa saw the neat house and barn, the corrals with his horses, and the rolling prairie stretching in every direction, her face filled with wonder. "Nathan, it's beautiful," she said, sliding down from the horse he'd borrowed from the livery for her use. "It's so peaceful out here." He showed her around, introducing her to each of his horses by name and personality, pointing out where he planned to expand the barn and build more corrals. Willa asked intelligent questions and offered observations that showed she was truly interested, not just being polite. Inside the house, Nathan had tidied up as best he could, and he'd picked more wildflowers to put in a jar on the table. It was a simple space, just 3 rooms and a loft, but he'd built it with his own hands and he was proud of it. "I know it's not much," Nathan started, but Willa cut him off. "It's wonderful," she said firmly. "It's a home, Nathan, a real home that you built yourself." That's more than most people can say. They had lunch at his table, sandwiches and apples and water from the well, and Nathan felt a rightness about having Willa there that he'd never experienced before. This was what had been missing from the house, he realized. Not furniture or decoration, but someone to share it with. After lunch, they walked out to a small rise behind the house where Nathan sometimes sat in the evenings. From there, they could see for miles in every direction, nothing but grass and sky and the distant line of the Black Hills. "I come here when I need to think," Nathan told her, "or when I need to remember why I'm working so hard. This land, this life, it's not easy, but it's mine, you know. I built it from nothing." "Your parents," Willa asked gently. "Dead," Nathan said shortly. "Cholera when I was 16. I've been on my own since then, working where I could, saving every penny until I could buy this land. I want to make it into something, Willa." A real horse ranch, breeding and training quality animals. Maybe even start a family someday if I'm lucky enough to find the right woman. He looked at her significantly, and Willa's breath caught. Nathan, I know it's too soon to talk about that, he said quickly. I know you've got your teaching to focus on, and we've only known each other 2 weeks, but I need you to know that's where my heart is heading. I'm falling in love with you, Willa Norton. Maybe I already have fallen, and if you feel even a fraction of the same, I'm willing to wait as long as it takes for you to be sure. Willa was quiet for a long moment, and Nathan's heart sank, thinking he'd pushed too hard, revealed too much. But then she turned to him, and there were tears in her eyes. I don't need to wait, she said, her voice shaking slightly. I already know, Nathan. I'm in love with you too. I have been for days, maybe since that first moment when I opened my eyes and saw you looking down at me with such concern. I thought I was coming to South Dakota to teach, to have an adventure, to escape my old life. But maybe I was really coming here to find you. Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest, feeling her heart beat in rhythm with his own. I promise I'll be good to you, he said into her hair. I'll work hard, provide for you, protect you. You'll never regret choosing me. I know, Willa whispered back. I already know. School started the following Monday, and Nathan rode into town to watch Willa greet her students for the first time. There were 14 children ranging in age from 6 to 15, and they looked at their new teacher with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. But Willa won them over within the first hour with her warmth, her clear expectations, and her genuine interest in each of them. Nathan watched through the window for a few minutes, his chest swelling with pride, before heading back to his ranch. He had work to do, horses to train, and now he had an additional motivation. He wanted to make his ranch successful enough to support a wife, because he was going to ask Willa to marry him. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon, as soon as he was sure she was ready. The fall passed in a pattern that felt like the best kind of routine. Willa taught during the week, pouring her energy into her students and making real progress with even the most reluctant learners. Nathan worked his ranch and took on additional jobs breaking horses for other ranchers, slowly building his reputation and his savings. Every Sunday, Willa would ride out to Nathan's ranch, and they'd spend the day together, talking and laughing and growing closer with each passing week. Nathan learned that Willa loved music, but couldn't carry a tune to save her life. Willa learned that Nathan had a dry sense of humor that caught people off guard. Nathan learned that Willa was afraid of spiders, but would bravely deal with them if her students needed her to remove one from the classroom. Willa learned that Nathan had a gentle touch with frightened animals and infinite patience with difficult ones. They talked about everything, their pasts and their dreams, their fears and hopes. Nathan told Willa about the loneliness of the years after his parents died, the grinding poverty, the determination to make something of himself. Willa told Nathan about her father's descent into alcoholism, the shame that surrounded her family, the relief mixed with guilt she'd felt when he finally died. Does that make me a terrible person? Willa asked one Sunday afternoon as they sat on the porch of Nathan's house, watching clouds build on the western horizon. That I was relieved when he died. No, Nathan said, taking her hand. It makes you human. You can love someone and still be relieved when their suffering ends, even if that relief complicates your grief. Willa leaned her head on his shoulder. How did you get so wise? Hard living, Nathan said with a small smile. And meeting you taught me that good things can happen when you least expect them. As November arrived and the weather turned colder, Nathan knew he couldn't wait any longer. He'd saved enough money to buy Willa a ring. A simple gold band with a small diamond that had cost him 2 months' worth of careful budgeting, and he'd been carrying it in his pocket for a week, waiting for the right moment. That moment came on a Sunday afternoon when they were riding back to his ranch from a neighboring spread where they'd been invited for lunch. The autumn sun was warm despite the chill in the air, and the prairie grass had turned golden, rolling like waves in the breeze. Nathan pulled his horse to a stop on a slight rise, and Willa halted beside him. "What is it?" she asked, following his gaze across the landscape. "I wanted to show you something," Nathan said, his heart pounding. He dismounted and helped Willa down, then led her a few steps forward. "You see that section there where the creek bends? That's the edge of my property. And over there, that line of trees, that's the other boundary. It's not a huge spread, but it's good land with good water." "It's beautiful," Willa said, though she was looking at Nathan with a slightly puzzled expression, clearly wondering why he was telling her things she already knew. Nathan took a deep breath. "I'm going to expand next year, buy the adjacent section if I can save enough for the down payment. Build a bigger barn, get more horses, make this into a real operation." He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "But none of it means anything if I'm doing it alone, Willa. These past months with you, they've been the happiest of my life. You make everything better, brighter, more worthwhile. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." Willa's eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, and Nathan could see that she knew what was coming. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket and pull out the small ring. "Willa Norton, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I know I'm just a rancher without much to offer except hard work and a heart full of love, but I promise I'll spend every day trying to make you happy. I'll support your teaching for as long as you want to do it. I'll build you the life you deserve. Just say yes." Tears were streaming down Willa's face, but she was smiling so wide it looked like her face might split. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Nathan, of course yes. I love you so much, and I can't imagine spending my life with anyone else." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, which seemed like a sign from the universe that they were meant to be. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with all the love and passion he'd been holding back, and Willa kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "When?" he asked. "When will you marry me?" "As soon as possible," Willa said immediately. "I don't want to wait, Nathan. We've already waited long enough." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in White River, with Dr. Harrison and his wife as witnesses along with half the town. Willa wore a cream-colored dress she'd altered from one of her good Sunday dresses, and she carried a bouquet of dried flowers since fresh ones were impossible to find in late November. Nathan wore his best suit, pressed and brushed until it looked almost new, and when Willa walked down the aisle toward him, he had to blink back tears. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Nathan kissed Willa with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. The reception was held in the church hall, with food contributed by various townspeople and music provided by a miner who played a surprisingly good fiddle. "I can't believe we're married," Willa whispered to Nathan as they swayed together during a slow dance. "Sometimes I still feel like I'm going to wake up and find out this was all a dream." "If it is, I don't want to wake up," Nathan replied, pulling her closer. "You're my wife, Willa Zimmerman. That has the most wonderful sound," Willa laughed. "It really does, doesn't it?" They spent their wedding night at Nathan's ranch, which was now Willa's ranch too, and everything felt different and new and perfect. Nathan carried her over the threshold with great ceremony, making Willa giggle, And then they were alone together for the first time as husband and wife. Nathan had been nervous about this part, worried about doing something wrong or hurting her, but Willa's trust and love made everything natural and right. They explored each other with tenderness and growing passion, learning what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp or sigh. And when they finally came together fully, it felt like the most natural thing in the world, like two pieces that had been searching for each other finally clicking into place. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Nathan's bed, which now was their bed, and talked in quiet voices about the future. "I want to keep teaching," Willa said softly, tracing patterns on Nathan's chest with her finger. "At least for a while. Is that all right?" "Of course it is," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You're brilliant at it, and those kids need you. We'll make it work." "And when we have children of our own?" Willa asked, a slight hesitation in her voice. Nathan's hand stilled where it had been stroking her arm. "You want children, eventually," Willa said. "Do you?" "Yes," Nathan said, and he was surprised by the surge of emotion that accompanied the word. "Yes, I want children with you, a whole houseful if we're blessed with them." Willa smiled against his chest. "Let's start with one and see how we manage." That winter was hard in the way Dakota winters always were, with bitter cold and fierce winds and snow that piled in drifts higher than a man's head. But inside the small ranch house, Nathan and Willa were warm and content. Willa had to temporarily suspend school during the worst of the weather, since it was too dangerous for the children to travel. But she used the time to plan lessons and work on expanding the school's small library. Nathan continued his work with the horses, though the cold made everything more difficult. He was up before dawn every morning, breaking ice in water troughs and making sure his animals were fed and sheltered. Willa would have breakfast ready when he came in, his face red from the cold, and she'd pour him coffee and they'd sit together at the table, planning their day. In the evenings, they'd sit by the fire and read aloud to each other, or Nathan would work on tack that needed mending while Willa graded her students' work. Sometimes they'd just talk, those long, rambling conversations that covered everything and nothing, the kind of talk that only happens between people who are truly comfortable with each other. "I never thought I could be this happy," Willa said one night, looking up from the mending in her lap. "When I got on that stage in Pennsylvania, I was running away from an unhappy situation. I thought it best I'd find a tolerable life teaching in a small western town. I never imagined I'd find you." Nathan set down the bridle he'd been oiling. "The day I saw you fall from that stage was the luckiest day of my life. I know that sounds terrible, considering you were hurt, but it's true. You changed everything for me, Willa." "We changed everything for each other," Willa corrected, and Nathan couldn't argue with that. Spring came slowly, as it always did in South Dakota, with false starts and setbacks and days when winter seemed determined to hold on forever. But eventually the snow melted, the grass turned green, and Willa reopened the school to her eager students who had missed both learning and their teacher. Nathan threw himself into the work of expanding his operation, using the money he'd saved to buy 3 more mares and a promising young stallion. He spent long hours training and working with the horses, building his reputation as someone who could gentle even the most difficult animals. Word spread, and soon he was getting requests from ranchers as far as 50 miles away. "You're going to work yourself into the ground," Willa scolded one evening when Nathan came in well after dark, exhausted and covered in dust. "You need to rest sometimes." "I'm building our future," Nathan protested, but he let her lead him to the table where she'd kept his dinner warm. "I want to give you everything, Willa. A bigger house, a comfortable life, security." "I don't need those things," Willa said, sitting across from him and taking his hand. I need you healthy and happy, Nathan. The house is fine. Our life is already comfortable. We have security. What we have is enough. But Nathan was driven by something deeper than logic, a need to prove himself worthy of this woman who had chosen him. He continued to push hard, and Willa learned to pick her battles, supporting him while also making sure he took care of himself. In May, Willa began feeling unwell in the mornings, a persistent nausea that wouldn't go away. At first, she dismissed it as something she'd eaten, but when it continued for over a week, she went to see Dr. Harrison. She returned home that afternoon with news that made Nathan drop the hammer he'd been using to repair a fence post. "I'm going to have a baby," Willa said, her face glowing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Dr. Harrison says probably late December or early January." Nathan stood frozen for a moment, then let out a whoop of joy and ran to her, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around before remembering her condition and setting her down carefully. "A baby," he said, his voice full of wonder. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Willa asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," Nathan said, cupping her face in his hands. "You've made me the happiest man in Dakota Territory, Willa Zimmerman." The pregnancy changed things in small ways. Willa continued teaching through the end of the school term in June, but she tired more easily, and Nathan insisted on driving her into town and back every day rather than letting her ride horseback. The school board agreed that Willa would take a break from teaching for the fall and winter, with plans to reassess in the spring depending on how things were going with the baby. Nathan became even more protective, constantly worrying about Willa overdoing it. She found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from a place of love. He'd lost so many people in his life, his parents most significantly, and she knew the thought of losing her or the baby terrified him. "I'm not fragile," Willa reminded him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I'm perfectly capable of doing my normal chores." "I know," Nathan said, looking somewhat embarrassed. "I just want to take care of you." "You do take care of me," Willa said, softening. "Every single day. But you have to let me do things too, Nathan. I need to feel useful." They found a balance, compromising on what Willa would and wouldn't do as her pregnancy progressed. The summer heat was brutal, and Willa spent the worst of it inside the house, working on sewing baby clothes and blankets, preparing for the arrival of their child. Nathan built a cradle during the long evenings, crafting it carefully from wood he'd saved for a special project, sanding it smooth so there were no rough edges that could hurt delicate baby skin. "It's beautiful," Willa said, running her hand over the smooth wood. "Our baby is so lucky to have you as a father." "I'm going to do my best," Nathan said seriously. "I want to be the kind of father mine was before the drinking started, before things got hard, patient, kind, teaching by example." "You'll be wonderful," Willa assured him. "I have no doubts about that." As autumn arrived and Willa's belly grew round and prominent, Nathan found himself overcome with love every time he looked at her. She was beautiful to him in a way that went beyond physical appearance, though he thought pregnancy made her glow. It was the whole of her, the strength and grace with which she faced this new challenge, the love she already had for their unborn child, the partnership they'd built together. In November, they celebrated their first wedding anniversary with a quiet dinner at home. The wind howled outside, a preview of the winter to come, but inside they were warm and safe. "A year ago I married the man of my dreams," Willa said, raising her glass of water in a toast. "Dr. Harrison had advised against alcohol during pregnancy. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Nathan corrected, touching his glass to hers. "The best was getting on that stage that brought you here, even if you did fall off it." Willa laughed. "I suppose you're right, though I could have done without the concussion and stitches." "But then I wouldn't have had an excuse to visit you every day and fall hopelessly in love," Nathan pointed out. "I think you would have found an excuse," Willa said, her eyes twinkling. "You're resourceful that way." As December arrived and Willa's due date approached, Nathan became increasingly anxious. He made sure Dr. Harrison knew exactly where the ranch was and had promised to come immediately when sent for. He stockpiled firewood and food, preparing for the possibility of being snowed in. He barely left Willa's side, constantly asking if she was all right, if she needed anything, if the baby was moving. "Nathan, you're making me nervous," Willa finally said one evening. "The baby will come when the baby is ready. Dr. Harrison says everything is progressing normally." "You need to relax." "How can I relax?" Nathan asked, running his hand through his hair in agitation. "So many things can go wrong. My own mother died giving birth to a stillborn baby when I was 14. What if something happens to you? I can't lose you, Willa. I can't." Willa's expression softened with understanding. She hadn't known about Nathan's mother's death in childbirth. He so rarely spoke about his parents that she'd assumed they'd both died of the cholera. "Come here," she said, holding out her hand. Nathan came to her and she placed his hand on her swollen belly. As if on cue, the baby kicked, a strong movement that made Nathan's eyes widen. "Feel that," Willa said. "That's our strong, healthy baby. Everything is going to be fine, Nathan. Dr. Harrison will be here and women do this every day. I'm not your mother and this isn't that situation. You have to trust that this will work out." Nathan pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm trying. I love you so much, Willa. You and this baby are my whole world." "And you're ours," Willa said. "Which is why you need to stay calm and strong for us, all right?" The baby came on a bitterly cold night in late December, 2 days after Christmas. Willa woke Nathan in the early hours of the morning, her face calm despite the pain she was clearly in. "It's time," she said simply. "You need to go get Dr. Harrison." Nathan dressed in record time and rode through the darkness to White River, pushing his horse faster than was probably wise on the icy roads, but he had to get to the doctor. Dr. Harrison, used to emergencies at all hours, was ready within minutes, and they made the return journey as quickly as safely possible. Margaret Harrison had come along to help, and she took charge of the situation with a competence that eased some of Nathan's panic. She boiled water and gathered clean linens while Dr. Harrison examined Willa. "Everything looks good," the doctor reported. "This baby is taking its time, though. It could be several more hours." Those hours were the longest of Nathan's life. He stayed by Willa's side, holding her hand through the contractions, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, murmuring encouragement and love. Willa was strong and focused, following Dr. Harrison's instructions, breathing through the pain with a determination Nathan had come to recognize as fundamental to who she was. As dawn began to lighten the sky outside, Willa's labor intensified. Nathan felt helpless, wishing he could take the pain for her, do something more than just be there. But every time he started to suggest he should leave the room, Willa gripped his hand tighter and said, "Stay." So he stayed, and he was there when Dr. Harrison finally said, "One more push, Willa. One more and you'll meet your baby." Willa gave it everything she had, and then the room filled with a sound Nathan would never forget, the strong, angry cry of a newborn baby. "It's a boy," Dr. Harrison announced, his face wreathed in smiles. "A fine, healthy boy." Nathan felt tears streaming down his face as the doctor placed the baby, cleaned and wrapped in a blanket Willa had made, in her arms. The infant had a shock of dark hair like Nathan's, and he was red-faced and furious about his abrupt entrance into the world. "Hello, little one," Willa said softly, her voice full of wonder. "Hello, my sweet boy. Your papa and I have been waiting for you." Nathan leaned over, looking at his son, and felt his heart expand with a love so fierce it almost hurt. "He's perfect," he whispered. "Willa, he's absolutely perfect." "He is," Willa agreed, looking up at Nathan with exhausted joy. "What should we name him?" They discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking at his son's face, Nathan knew. "Noah," he said. "Noah James Zimmerman, after both our fathers." Willa's eyes filled with tears. Her father's name had been James, and despite everything, she'd loved him. And Nathan's father had been Noah, a good man before hard times broke him. "It's perfect," she said. "Hello, Noah. Welcome to the world." Dr. Harrison and Margaret stayed for a few more hours, making sure Willa was recovering well and showing Nathan how to help care for the baby. When they finally left, promising to return in a few days to check on everyone, Nathan and Willa were alone with their son for the first time. "I can't believe he's really here," Nathan said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and gazing at Noah, who had fallen asleep in Willa's arms. "Our son." "Our son," Willa echoed, her voice full of contentment despite her exhaustion. "We made him, Nathan. This perfect little person who will grow up surrounded by love and opportunity. He'll never have to wonder if he's wanted or loved. He'll always know." Nathan leaned down and kissed Willa gently. "You're an amazing mother already, and you were so strong, Willa." "I was terrified, but you were incredible." "You were exactly what I needed," Willa said, reaching up to touch his face. "Thank you for being there, for not leaving even when it got hard." "I'll always be there," Nathan promised. "For you and for Noah. Whatever comes, we face it together." The first months of Noah's life were a blur of sleepless nights and constant adjustments. Nathan took over all the household chores and most of the outside work, wanting Willa to focus on recovering and caring for the baby. She protested at first, but she was so tired from nursing Noah every few hours that she eventually accepted Nathan's help with gratitude. Nathan was a natural father, gentle and patient with his tiny son. He would pace the floor at night, Noah cradled against his shoulder, singing old songs his own father had sung to him. He changed diapers without complaint and bathed Noah with hands that could gentle wild horses but were infinitely tender with his child. "You're wonderful with him," Willa said one evening, watching Nathan rock Noah to sleep. "Sometimes I think he likes you better than me." "Impossible," Nathan said, but he was pleased by the compliment. "You're his whole world. I'm just the one who can walk him around when he's fussy." As winter slowly gave way to spring, Noah grew and changed, becoming more alert and interactive. His eyes turned out to be the same creek watercolor as his mother's, which delighted Nathan to no end. "He's going to be a heartbreaker," Nathan predicted, "with your eyes and your looks." "Hopefully with your steady temperament," Willa added. "I was a terrible handful as a child, or so my mother always said." "I find that hard to believe," Nathan said, though privately he could imagine a young Willa full of curiosity and questions, challenging authority and pushing boundaries. In April, the school board approached Willa about returning to teaching in the fall. Willa was torn, wanting to provide for her family and continue the work she loved, but also reluctant to leave Noah. "What do you want to do?" Nathan asked as they discussed it. "Not what you think you should do or what would be most practical. What does your heart say?" Willa thought about it carefully. "I want to teach," she finally said. "I miss it, and I know I'm good at it, but I also want to be there for Noah, see him grow, be present for all his firsts." "What if you teach part-time?" Nathan suggested. "The younger children in the morning and home by early afternoon. That way you can do both." The school board agreed to the arrangement, relieved to have Willa back in any capacity. So that fall, Willa returned to teaching 3 mornings a week, while Margaret Harrison watched Noah. It was the perfect compromise, allowing Willa to engage with the work she loved while still being primarily focused on their son. The years that followed were full and happy. The ranch prospered as Nathan's reputation grew, and they were able to expand, adding more horses and eventually hiring a young man named Peter to help with the work. Willa continued teaching part-time, watching her students grow and learn, feeling fulfilled by making a difference in young lives. Noah grew into a bright, curious toddler, then a rambunctious little boy. He had his mother's intelligence and his father's way with animals, spending hours following Nathan around the ranch, learning everything his papa would teach him. When Noah was 3, Willa became pregnant again, and this time Nathan was much calmer, trusting that everything would work out. Their second child, a daughter they named Grace, arrived on a beautiful May morning, her birth so much easier than Noah's had been. She had Nathan's dark hair and his brown eyes, and from the beginning, she was a sunny, easy baby who smiled at everyone. "Our family is complete," Willa said, nursing Grace while Noah climbed onto the bed beside her to meet his sister. "2 healthy, perfect children. We're so blessed, Nathan." "More blessed than I ever imagined possible," Nathan agreed, his arm around Willa, watching Noah gently touch Grace's tiny hand. "That day you fell off the stagecoach, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I had no idea I was finding my whole future." "Best fall I ever took," Willa said with a smile, and Nathan laughed, remembering how they'd joked about that over the years. Noah was a protective big brother, always wanting to help with Grace, bringing her toys when she cried, proudly telling anyone who would listen about his baby sister. As Grace grew, the 2 became constant companions despite their 3-year age difference, getting into mischief together and having adventures around the ranch. The ranch continued to thrive. Nathan's horse breeding program became known throughout the territory, with people coming from as far as Wyoming and Nebraska to buy his horses. They built a larger house, with separate bedrooms for the children and a real parlor where Willa could host the occasional social gathering. But despite their increased prosperity, they never forgot where they'd started or the values that had brought them together. Willa taught until Noah was old enough to start school, at which point she transitioned to teaching him, and eventually Grace at home. She loved having that time with her children, opening up the world of books and learning to them, seeing them develop their own interests and passions. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Willa back to the place where he'd proposed, that same rise overlooking his original property. The land looked different now, more developed with better fencing and multiple buildings, but the essential beauty remained. "Remember when this was just a dream?" Nathan asked, his arm around Willa's waist. "When I was a young rancher with more ambition than sense, asking a sophisticated Eastern teacher to take a chance on me. I remember thinking you were the most genuine person I'd ever met," Willa said, leaning into his embrace. "You still are, Nathan. Success hasn't changed you. You're still the man who raced through the dust to help a stranger, who cared more about whether I was hurt than anything else. You changed my life," Nathan said seriously. "Before you, I was just surviving, working toward a goal but not really living. You taught me what it means to love, to build a life with someone, to think about more than just the next day's work." "We changed each other's lives," Willa corrected, as she had so many times over the years. "I was running away when I came here, scared and alone and not sure what I was looking for. You gave me a home, Nathan, not just this ranch, but a real home in your heart. You gave me the family I'd always wanted, the love I didn't know I was searching for." They stood there together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, their children playing in the yard below under the watchful eye of Peter's wife, whom they'd hired to help with household tasks. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd built together, spread out before them. "I love you," Nathan said, turning to face Willa fully. "More now than even on the day we married, which I wouldn't have thought possible. You've given me everything, Willa. A home, children, purpose, joy. I don't have words for how grateful I am that you fell off that stagecoach." Willa laughed, that same bright laugh that had first captivated Nathan years ago. "I love you too, Cowboy, and I'd fall off 100 stagecoaches if it meant ending up here with you." They kissed as the last rays of sunlight gilded the prairie, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting and true. As the years continued to pass, their love only deepened. They faced challenges, as all families do. There were harsh winters and dry summers that tested the ranch. There were illnesses and injuries, including a scary incident when Noah broke his arm falling from a horse, and another when Grace developed a fever that lasted for days. There were disagreements and frustrations, moments when the stress of running a ranch and raising children felt overwhelming. But through it all, Nathan and Willa remained each other's anchor and refuge. They never went to bed angry, always taking the time to talk through their differences until they reached understanding. They made their marriage a priority even when life was hectic, stealing moments together, taking walks in the evening after the children were in bed, sitting close on the porch swing and just being together. When Noah turned 18, he announced his intention to start his own horse ranch on the far side of their property, using money he'd saved from working. Nathan and Willa were proud of his ambition and his work ethic, seeing how they'd successfully passed on their values to their son. Grace, 2 years away from her own adulthood, was already showing signs of her mother's teaching gift, helping the younger children in the area with their lessons. "We did good," Nathan said one evening, watching Noah work with a difficult mare, showing the same patience and skill Nathan had demonstrated over the years. "Our children are good people, Willa. Hard-working, honest, kind." "They had good examples," Willa replied, her head on Nathan's shoulder. "You've been a wonderful father, Nathan. Patient when I probably would have lost my temper, gentle when firmness was needed, always there for them." "We did it together," Nathan said, the familiar refrain. "Everything good in my life we built together." When Noah married at 20, bringing home a sweet young woman named Sarah whom he'd met at a church social, Nathan and Willa helped them build a small house on the property and start their own herd. When Grace finished her education and decided to open a school for younger children in White River, they supported her dream, helping her secure a building and supplies. The ranch continued to prosper, Nathan's expertise and reputation making their horses sought after throughout the region. They employed several hands now, and the operation had grown far beyond what Nathan had originally envisioned. But success had never been the point for him. The point was building something lasting, creating a legacy for his children, and having a life filled with love and meaning. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration. Noah and Sarah had 3 children of their own now, and Grace had recently married a doctor who had come to White River the previous year. The house was full of noise and laughter and love, exactly the way Nathan and Willa liked it best. That evening, after everyone had gone home and they were alone in the quiet house, Nathan pulled Willa into his arms. She was older now, lines around her eyes and silver threading through her blonde hair, but to Nathan, she was as beautiful as the day he'd found her lying in the dust. "25 years," he said softly. "Where did they go?" "Into building this," Willa replied, gesturing around them at the life they'd created. "Every day, every moment going into creating something lasting and real." "Do you have any regrets?" Nathan asked. "Things you wish you'd done differently?" Willa thought about it, then shook her head. "No. My life is exactly what I wanted it to be, even if I didn't know that's what I was looking for when I left Pennsylvania. You, our children, this ranch, the life we've built. I wouldn't change any of it. Not even the part where you fell off a stagecoach and got a concussion." Nathan asked, a teasing note in his voice. "Especially not that part," Willa said firmly. "Because it brought me to you, Nathan Zimmerman, and you are the best thing that ever happened to me." They stood together in the gathering darkness, still as in love as they'd been at the beginning, their hearts beating in comfortable rhythm. Two people who had found each other against all odds and created something beautiful and lasting from a chance meeting on a dusty Dakota road. The years continued their gentle march forward, bringing changes and growth. Nathan's hair turned silver, and he moved a bit slower than he used to, but his love for horses and the land never diminished. Willa's teaching days were behind her, but she found new purpose in helping Sarah with the grandchildren and supporting Grace's school. Their grandchildren brought fresh joy and energy into their lives, reminding them of when Noah and Grace were small, running wild around the ranch. Nathan taught the older ones to ride and care for horses, passing on skills he'd spent a lifetime perfecting. Willa read to the younger ones, opening up worlds of imagination and learning just as she'd done for countless students over the years. On quiet evenings, Nathan and Willa would sit on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, and they would talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes they reminisced about the early days, laughing at how young and naive they'd been, marveling at how far they'd come. Other times they talked about the present, about their children's lives and their grandchildren's antics. "You remember that first day?" Willa asked one particularly beautiful evening, "when you came riding through the dust after me?" "Like it was yesterday," Nathan replied, taking her hand in his. "I saw you fall and I just reacted. Didn't even think about it, just knew someone needed help and I could provide it." "You saved my life," Willa said, not for the first time over the years. "If you hadn't found me, if you'd been traveling a different route that day, I could have died out there." "But I was there," Nathan said, squeezing her hand. "I was exactly where I needed to be at exactly the right moment. Some might call that luck, I call it fate." "I call it the best day of my life," Willa said. "Even with the concussion and the stitches and losing all my belongings, because it led to this, to everything we have now." Nathan turned to look at his wife, this remarkable woman who had agreed to build a life with him, who had been his partner through every joy and every challenge. "I love you, Willa Zimmerman. I've loved you since the day you opened those incredible eyes and looked up at me from the dirt. I'll love you until the day I die and beyond if such things are possible." "I know," Willa said, her own eyes shining with tears. "And I love you just as much, Nathan. You've been everything I needed and more than I deserved. Thank you for riding after me that day. Thank you for every day since." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, hands linked, hearts connected. Two souls who had found each other in the dust and built an empire of love that would last long after they were gone. Their story became something of a legend in White River and the surrounding areas. People would point out the Zimmerman Ranch and tell the tale of how it all started, with a woman falling from a stagecoach and a cowboy who rode after her through the dust. Young couples would look at Nathan and Willa and hope that someday they'd have a love that strong, that lasting. But for Nathan and Willa themselves, it wasn't a legend or a story. It was simply their life, lived one day at a time, built on foundation of love and trust and commitment. They'd started with nothing but each other, and they'd created something beautiful and enduring. When Nathan was 75 and Willa 73, they sat together on that same porch swing they'd occupied for so many years, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. The ranch was now run primarily by Noah with help from his sons, but it still bore the mark of Nathan's vision and hard work. "We did all right," Nathan said, his voice rougher with age but still holding that warmth Willa had loved from the beginning. "Didn't we?" "We did more than all right," Willa replied, her head resting on his shoulder. "We built something extraordinary, Nathan. A family, a legacy, a love that will be remembered and cherished by generations we'll never meet." "All because you fell off a stagecoach," Nathan said with a soft chuckle. "All because you rode after me," Willa corrected. "You could have kept going, convinced yourself someone else would help, but you didn't. You rode through the dust to help a stranger, and that made all the difference." Nathan pressed a kiss to the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the comfortable weight of her against him. "Best decision I ever made." As the sun set on another day, painting the South Dakota sky in shades of glory, Nathan and Willa sat together, surrounded by the evidence of their love and their life's work. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the yard with laughter and joy. The ranch they'd built spread out before them, and their hearts were full to bursting with gratitude for the life they'd shared. They had started with a chance encounter on a dusty road, a moment of crisis that brought two people together. They had built from that moment something lasting and beautiful, a love story that would be told and retold, inspiring others to take chances, to be brave, to believe in the possibility of finding love in the most unexpected places. And as the stars began to emerge, diamond bright against the darkening sky, Nathan and Willa remained together as they had always been, hand in hand, heart to heart. Two people who had found their forever on a dusty Dakota road and never let go. The story of their love, born from a fall and a rescue, lived on long after them in the hearts of their descendants and the memories of those who had known them. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the magic that can happen when two people find each other against all odds and choose, every single day, to build something beautiful together. Their legacy wasn't just the successful ranch or the children they'd raised, or the lives they'd touched through teaching and community involvement. Their legacy was the example they set of what love could be when nurtured with patience, respect, dedication, and genuine partnership. They showed everyone around them that true love wasn't just a moment of passion or a romantic gesture. It was choosing each other repeatedly, supporting each other's dreams, working through difficulties together, and building a life that honored both individuals while creating something greater than either could have achieved alone. Years later, when their grandchildren told the story to their own children, they would speak of the day Willa fell from the stagecoach and Nathan rode after her through the dust. They would talk about the love that grew from that dramatic beginning, a love that weathered every storm and celebrated every joy. They would point to the ranch that still stood, to the family that had grown and spread, to the school that still bore Willa's influence, and they would say with pride, "This all started because two brave people took a chance on love." And that, in the end, was the truest legacy of all. That love, when given freely and nurtured carefully, could create miracles that echoed through generations, transforming lives and inspiring hearts long after the original lovers had gone to their rest. Nathan and Willa's love story became more than just their own. It became a beacon of hope and possibility for everyone who heard it, proof that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected beginnings, and that taking a chance on love is always, always worth it.